You are about to participate in a great adventure. You are about to experience the awe and mystery which reaches from the inner mind.
With the emergence of global internet, a human population of several billions, an electronic noosphere, that we are now within the shadow of this transcendental object at the end of time.
I find it a little difficult to say what the subject matter is going to be, because
Magic is an enemy and truth is a menace.
Shake and bake, steps back, three-pointer, bang!
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another fine episode of the Midnight Variety Hour, your favorite late-night programming on a Friday evening. Joined, as always, by my lovely co-host,
Your boy Adam.
and today we have a very special guest in the studio with us today. He is co-owner of the company we are very happy to work at, RFC Media. He's also Adam's stepfather and a huge friend of the show. We are very happy to have him here. Cruze, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
What's up?
Thanks for inviting me to come on the show. To be honest, I had no idea I was interesting enough to be a
You are
subject
beyond
of the
interesting.
program.
Whatever, man.
Yeah.
I've
No way.
I've listened to a number of your
Yeah.
show's episodes. To be honest, I haven't heard every one because some of them go on for
Oh,
quite a
yeah.
while.
Ages, yeah.
But no,
Don't
I've listened
blame
to
me.
a number of episodes, and I will say they're all very enjoyable. But if somebody were to ask me what the show's about,
Yeah.
I would have no idea what to tell them. It's just
Variety
it's
hour.
just variety, yeah.
And that's why we
exactly.
put variety in the title. You know, we've tried to summarize it a few times before. I know in our episode 0, our debut episode, we kind of just talked for like half an hour
Yeah.
about what this was going to be, and then we realized, it's zero format. It's kind of just
Yeah.
we're in here spitballing.
Yeah.
So, but the one trend that runs consistently through the show is we have people on that we feel either have lived interesting lives or have interesting passions or have interesting stories to tell, and we kind of just chat about life and the universe and their take on it, which is why you are here today, because you have done some amazing things in your time in radio and all the different parts of the country you've lived in, and amazing people you've met and musicians and things like that. So why don't you just start and tell us like a little bit about yourself, who you are and what you do.
Well, I realized pretty young, back in like junior high and high school, that I didn't want to be like what I saw some of my older, cousins and uncles being, which was basically you graduate from high school, you go to college, you spend maybe 4 years getting a degree so you can get a job in a field that will pay you enough so you can enjoy the weekends.
Right.
I wanted to do something that I loved every day. And I was always very involved in things like, acting and speaking when I was in school.
Like the arts. field.
Yeah, the arts in particular. I did debate and persuasive speaking, and I was involved. I won a few state awards for performances in one-act play and things like that. All that stuff that you have a chance to be involved in school. So I decided that I wanted to either be, and I decided this, by the way, while I was doing my summer job, which was working in a field with mud up to my knees, irrigating peanuts by moving manual huge pieces of pipe.
Oh my God.
16 rows over, reconnecting them and starting. So I was like, okay, I don't mind doing this now, so I can save up enough money to buy a car.
Yeah.
But I'm not doing something like this for a living.
Right.
And I decided that I either wanted to be an actor or to be in radio.
Okay.
And as it turns out, and this is quite a while ago, radio offered me the first a chance to do it for money, so that was what I went into, and I enjoyed a really awesome career in radio back when it was a really fun thing to do. It's not nearly as fun anymore as the industry has changed, and
Which I want
there's
to talk about that too, a little bit about
consolidation and stuff. Sure.
how radio died or how it went,
Yeah.
gone the way of the,
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but during the time that I was there, it was a blast. And when it stopped being nearly as much fun, and when I started to realize, I'm not going to be able to make the same kind of living that I've been making,
Right.
The only thing I could think of was to kind of step out on my own and try to start something. So I started RFC Media with Pat Fant, who you've had on the show. He's my business partner. And that was, almost 14 years ago. So they say most businesses fail by the second
Right.
year. We've made it this far, so far, knock on wood.
Yeah.
And,
That is amazing.
and we'll see if we can keep it going. So
Yeah, I kind of had a similar experience when I was in college. I thought, I'm going to be a geology major. I'm going to become a petroleum geologist because I know that when I graduate, I can make 6 figures, and I'll come out. And I live in Houston. I'll come down and work for BP or Shell,
petroleum
and
companies,
I'll make $100,000 a year as a 22-year-old. And I got like a year into that, and I was miserable. I was depressed. I hated going to class every day. And one day I was like, I just can't do it anymore. So I thought, like, what can I do? So I just started exploring all the other majors at my college. We had a really good communication school. Dan Rather went there. So we have the Dan Rather School of Communications. So, the school has their own radio station. They have their own TV channel. They offer opportunities for the students to do, like, sports broadcasting for the college games. And I just walked in one day to check it out, and I saw, like, the DJ booth they had in the communications building, and I thought, you know what? All right. And I just changed to a broadcast production degree. And here I am now, and I'm so glad that I did because, I would have just been miserable, and I realized being happy is far more important than, just trying to do everything you can for $1. And I've found it to be such a rewarding path.
It is.
Yeah.
Most of the reason that people want to make money is so they can use that money to buy or do things they enjoy in an attempt to be happy.
Right.
If you can find a way to be happy that isn't based on how much money you make, whether it's enjoying what you do or being able to find an outlook on life where what you view as happiness and success isn't always something with a dollar sign on it, then you're going to be a much more, I think, fulfilled person in your life. So I always encourage people, do what you want to do. Find something you're passionate about and figure out how to how to pay the bills by doing it if you can. And it's worked for me, and sometimes I've done a better job of paying the bills than others, but by and large though, I've been able to be successful enough that I'm a much happier person than I think I would have been had I gone the path that so many of my friends and contemporaries went.
Yeah.
And I think in this time and age, I feel like this day and age, it's much, I wouldn't say easier, but I think more opportunity to have a passionate or a love as a job, like, instead of,
I think that's right. Yeah.
Because I feel like, you have YouTubers, TikTokers now, and you know what I mean? Like the whole world of the internet, and then
back in the day, you could be a farmer, or you could work at an industrial plant, or like there were some
options.
jobs, but not a lot of other options available to most people. These days, it's really, and this, I guess, is as corny as it sounds. It's kind of the American dream. Like if you can dream
really
it
is.
and figure it out, you can do it, and that's a pretty cool thing.
And then whenever robots run the world and they're doing everyone's jobs, we're gonna have to find. You better find something that you love to do.
But seriously,
if what I see in the future is correct, our job will be fighting the robots, because that's what I'm expecting.
Sign me
to
up.
happen.
I know.
But then I watch a lot of sci-fi movies, so.
I know, but automation is getting really crazy.
Well, it is.
But in radio, because we were talking about the history of radio, and no one is physically spinning records anymore. Everything is so automated and computerized now that sort of like the soul has become a bit more automated of radio, right?
Well, yeah. Music radio in particular went through a number of evolutions. The first one, when music radio first started, it was primarily you would find a host, someone who knew about music, whether it was big band or classical or in the early days rock and roll, and they would be the presenter. It would be like their show, in much the same way that this is your show, that you sort of bring forth to people things you think are interesting, you think that they'll like. And as time went by and radio stations began to become more valuable and ratings became more critical, some guys came in who kind of developed the science of how to program a radio station, how to take a certain set of songs and play those songs a certain set of times, and rather than giving the DJ the chance to, spin what he wanted to spin, you spin these and just entertain people in between them. And that kind of ushered in a whole, sort of golden age of radio, because it started making a lot of money. And for the most part, the guys doing that, knew what they were doing from a music programming standpoint. But at that point, it lost the sort of individualism that it had when you had a host going, here's one I think you'll like, and really meaning that as opposed to just saying it. And then the last part of it, the last change, was in really the mid to late 90s when the government changed the laws about how many radio stations one company could own in any particular broadcast market or city. And when that happened and companies could own more, it started this crazy buying spree.
Like monopolies.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah. And companies were, because they felt like that was the way that they could operate best, is if
Sure.
they had more signals. And so they started buying everything up. Radio stations' value shot up like by huge multiples. And then sort of when the dust sort of settled from that, all of a sudden you had companies who'd paid big money for these stations.
Like billions,
big
right?
money. Yeah, I don't know if anything ever sold for $1 billion, but multiple millions. And even in some smaller cities. I mean, things were just, it was kind of like the Wild West at that point for sales. But then what happens is when a company has, when a company is kind of operating and making a little profit and all of that kind of stuff, they may not actually put too much pressure on the people who are creating the content. But when a company comes in and pays $350 million for a radio station, you better believe they're going to not only try to hire somebody to do the content, but they're going to hire somebody to look over his shoulder, and they're going to hire 17 consultants to report to them about how that guy's doing.
Right.
So everybody across time kind of became afraid for their job. And when you're because if the ratings go down a little bit and these 17 consultants say, well, it's because you're doing so-and-so, you're in trouble. And so everybody stopped being creative. They stopped taking chances. They stopped being,
Everything became
being
calculated.
groundbreaking. Exactly. Everything became calculated. Everything became safe. And then around the early 2000s, the bottom fell out of the radio market, and because all these stations were overvalued, and virtually every major radio company that's operating today, the big ones, they've all at some point in the last 10 to 15 years all declared bankruptcy. They're still operating because the banks don't want to take the radio stations back. What are they going to do with them? Their best chance to get some of their investment back is to allow these people to operate and continue to, try to extend these things. So that's a long explanation. But bottom line is the money got so big that all the creativity got kind of sucked out, and then it collapsed.
Right.
And now it's even more desperate for a lot of these
like the perfect storm
stations.
of
So,
just-
I was very fortunate that most of my career in radio was kind of leading up to and into the first part of that. So I was still at stations where we got to do, wild and crazy fun things to try to get listeners' attention. And it was just prosperous enough that, if you could pull together a sizable audience, you could make a decent living doing that. And plus, just got to do a lot of fun shit that that just a lot of that has been squeezed out because it might cost an extra $1 or $2.
Right.
So,
And speaking of the fun shit, I mean, I've heard story after story of you getting to interview or meet these really cool people from like Green Day, Eminem, Lenny Kravitz, like some of the really cool, just like awesome people who are artists that are in the world, and you got to meet them and talk with these guys. Like, can you talk about some of those events? Because those are some of my favorite stories, like that you tell me, and I just like
but that's usually just
love that,
when you're over to the house and I'm drinking.
I know,
But,
I know, but I mean,
but I
maybe
do have a beer.
You're
so-
drinking
I
right
guess,
now, yeah.
I mean, you don't have to name drop if it's, or anything like that, but
I don't mind telling these stories, but a couple of things you have to remember is one is that none of these things happened because I was any sort of a mover or shaker. I was at the radio station, and the labels would bring these people by or give us access to them when they were in town to do shows in order to do interviews. So it wasn't like I was, I'm not Graham Norton or, what's his name that does the carpool karaoke thing.
James Corden.
James
yeah,
Corden,
yeah,
thank you. I'm not one of those guys that people are lining up to be interviewed by me.
Yeah, sure.
I just happen to be in the right place at the right time. And then, of course, the second thing is that I've been kind of out of that for about 15 years now, so my stories are a little dated. I haven't interviewed The Weeknd or Ariana Grande or anybody that's more current.
nobody likes them anyway.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. We're among friends. This is great. No, what? A couple of the more interesting things. I mean, I'll do a little name dropping just to show that I did do a couple of cool things. I interviewed Eminem when his first record came out, and he, about 3 months after I had a chance to interview him, he literally stopped doing interviews altogether,
Wow.
except for like maybe Rolling Stone or,
Right.
or something like that. But
he was very particular about like what he did, right? Like,
Well,
I know
yeah.
even now he will like kind of only do shows in Detroit. Like he's very like kind of picky about the
Right.
stuff he does.
Right, and he may not have been quite as picky back then, but
Yeah.
but it all came because his success was starting to really balloon right about the time that I had him come on the show. And one of the things that I've always tried to teach, and I was on air for virtually all of my career, but I was also in programming and management. And one of the things I always tried to teach my staff people was that when you're doing an interview, if you can figure out something that the person you're interviewing is interested in talking about
Right.
and kind of lead with that or go to it early in the interview, you'll get a lot better responsiveness from them about everything else. Because sometimes artists come in and you're like, so, yes, well, what's going on with you? And they're giving you one-word answers,
right.
and it's not a very interesting interview. So with Eminem, I had just read this thing a little before he came in to be interviewed about how into his daughter he was.
Yeah.
He was very young at the time.
Yeah.
Haley, I think his name?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He
Talks about
her.
it.
Yeah.
He
In,
like
every song, almost
Yeah.
every other
Yeah.
song,
Yeah.
there's a name
So,
drop.
but
yeah.
but she was just I'd read where he'd said she was just like the most important thing in his life. And
Yeah.
So I actually opened up the interview with saying, "Hey, I've heard you talking a lot about your daughter Haley. How difficult is it to be now out on
Right.
tour and not being able to to see her every day?" And he just opened up and started talking about his daughter and how much he missed her when he was on the road. Nothing too earth shattering, but from that point on, anything I asked him,
Right.
he was an open book.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
he would just so the whole reason I even mentioned this was we had a little kind of green room area outside the studio. This is when I was in Boston at WFNX. We had a little green room area outside the studio, and that's where his posse was. And Eminem's this little bitty guy, little bitty
Yeah.
white guy,
Yeah, he's
and he
not
had
tall at
these
all,
like
yeah.
he had these like enormous
His entourage.
linebacker
Yeah.
looking guys that were his entourage. But I wrapped up the interview, thanked him, kind of like went to a commercial break or whatever, and he went out, and I came out of the studio just to thank him again for coming in for the interview. And when I walked out of the studio, I walked right in on him telling his entourage that was the best interview he'd ever done.
No way.
So
That is
that's a
wild.
pretty
Yeah.
cool thing to have somebody say. Now, I'm sure I didn't wind up being the best
Yeah,
one
but
he'd
I'm
ever
sure
done.
he
But
probably still remembers that,
but
that
to
interview,
that to that point in time, he was. Now,
Yeah.
not all of my interviews were that successful.
yeah, I think you told me a
Oh,
couple.
boy.
Once I went-
Yeah. A couple of my favorite interview stories, and I've interviewed a lot of people, music artists, comedians, people in the news, different things, just depending on what I was doing at the station at that time. But I remember back in the 90s, after Alanis Morissette put out her hugely successful album Jagged Little Pill, which was one of the biggest at the time. It was like one of the biggest albums ever, and it was just
Right.
this huge thing.
Yeah, my mom loved her and played her music all the time in the house when I
She
was
still
growing up.
likes her, by the
Oh
way.
yeah, I know. Yeah, still her
I'm married to
favorite.
Adam's mom,
Yeah.
so
Spoiler alert. No.
so she still loves Alanis, and I do too. I enjoy her music, but she had released this album, and it was filled with all these like really deep songs about you could just tell there was a lot going on psychologically with this girl and the
Right.
songs that she'd written, right? So the album becomes a huge hit. She records the follow-up, and on the follow-up, she's making the rounds doing interviews. And I remember we were at, I don't know, like the Warner Brothers field offices or something, and I went in with a tape recorder to record the interview, and so they're bringing her around from room to room with different people they've got
Yeah.
set up to do interviews. And she comes in, and I had gotten a copy of the album and listened to it quite a bit. And it was just as psychologically thick as the album that preceded it.
Yeah.
Even though it didn't wind up selling nearly as well, but it did fine. But I paid a lot of attention to the lyrics and what she was writing about and the stuff it sounded like she was going through. And so when she came into the room, and I swear to you, I thought she would like this. I didn't say it trying to be mean.
Right.
She sat down. I said, "Oh, it's great to blah blah blah." I was like, "So I've spent some time with the album." I said, "You've still got some issues." I thought she would love this because that's
It
what her
was
whole
just-
music is about,
Yeah.
right? This clearly rubbed her the wrong way, and so I spent the rest of the interview getting a lot of those, one-word
Oh,
answers,
yeah.
and
Wow.
she wasn't too into it. And then the other quick interview story I'll tell, because it was a total fail on my part. was when I got to interview David Bowie, which
Oh, no
what
way.
a huge
Yeah.
thing that is.
That's
right?
incredible.
So I was part of a thing. This is again from when I was on the air in Boston. I got sent to Las Vegas for a few days to broadcast live from a broadcast room that had been set up backstage at something called the Radio Music Awards. I don't think they have these anymore, but at the time, it was really just another excuse to do another award show because they did pretty well in the ratings on TV.
Right.
And this particular one would award artists who'd done the best on the radio airplay charts for the year. So it wasn't like the Grammys or something where there's
Right.
a committee and they vote. Anyway, it was still a fairly big deal, and it was in Vegas, and we were at, I want to say, the Bellagio,
Oh, wow.
in a broadcast room back in the area where the very close to where the actual event would happen that night, and there'd be artists performing, and they'd give out the awards and stuff. And so the record labels and the management companies were bringing people through, and we interviewed all kinds of people. I interviewed Lenny Kravitz there.
Yeah.
I had interviewed him once before, but he came by, and I got to chat with him for a little bit.
Remember you told me he was a little musty.
He wasn't so much at the when I interviewed him in Vegas, but the first time I interviewed him was back when his very first album came
Yeah.
out. He was a little rich.
Right,
Yeah.
It probably smelled like incense and
Just like earth. It
Yeah.
probably just smelled like earth.
The combination of not bathing and patchouli was what he
Right.
smelled
Wow.
like,
Yeah.
and it's not a great combination.
Yeah.
But no. By the time I interviewed him in Vegas several years later, he smelled great. So the other group, I don't know if you guys remember the Bangles. Are you too old to remember the Bangles?
I know
Walk
them.
Like,
I don't know.
Walk Like an Egyptian.
I
the
don't think
Bangles?
I was alive
Yeah.
when they were at their biggest, but
Yeah.
I definitely know of them.
Well, when they first started touring around, it was just them in a van, and they would walk into the studio,
Yeah.
and it was like, whoo, like where's my
Yeah.
COVID mask? I need something. Help me.
And this is like the 80s, right? They were a big
that
80s
was
band. Yeah.
back in the 80s. So, but when I interviewed David Bowie, and I was so excited because I'm a lifelong
Yeah.
Bowie fan.
He's
I just
amazing.
think he's one of the true geniuses of rock and roll.
Sure.
And he's always changing and always looks different. So it just so happened that I had watched a documentary on him a few weeks before this interview. So I was really happy because I had some
Right.
some things to touch on and stuff. But one of the things that I noticed is, and I noticed this when he walked in and sat down, the David Bowie of the 70s and even the early 80s, he had like crooked teeth.
Right.
He had, he was not. He was interesting because of like what he did and what he
Right.
would wear and what his music was. But when he walked in that room and sat down, I mean, he looked like
Regular
a
guy.
GQ model. Like he
Yeah.
was, he just looked great.
Yeah. Tailored
And
suit, probably, yeah.
he looked like a star. He was handsome,
Mm-hmm.
and so. And this one's totally my fault. Looking back, I shouldn't have done that. But just after the interview got underway, I said, David, I just have to say, how do you do it? I mean, you look better now than you did back in the day. And he immediately thought I was trying to say, you've had a lot of work
Right.
done.
Yeah.
And he took great offense to it, and
Oh, no.
it completely
No.
torpedoed my interview with David Bowie, but not enough to make me not like him.
It's
like,
so
I
funny
still,
how
I
just
still
one
think
little
he's
thing can just switch everything. Just
Oh,
one
yeah.
little thing. It's
And
not even a big deal.
I really wasn't trying to say you've had work done. I was
Right.
trying to say, man,
Yeah.
you look great.
Yeah,
you
right,
know.
right.
But yeah, that wasn't exactly how he.
And you never know what mood they're going to be in. I mean, he could have spilled his coffee on himself in the morning. He could have just been having a horrible day. You know what I mean? But I mean,
Yeah.
you could have said that exact same comment to him a week earlier,
Right.
and he'd just take it a completely different way. It's so
Exactly.
interesting. You
Yeah,
never know what
right.
headspace they're in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe somebody else had said something
Right.
that made him sensitive about
Someone in
that,
the elevator said, "Have you had work done?"
Right,
and
exactly.
then, boom,
Right,
and
and-
then
yeah. So, but yeah, looking back, I should have known better. That
Right.
one was my fault. I had a
Yeah.
chance to interview like one of my all-time favorite
Idols,
rock
yeah.
stars, and I just absolutely blew it.
wow.
Well, I mean, the chance, even just the opportunity to be able to sit down with somebody like that is so cool, and that's why I love the fact that, being in that field of radio and in that area was such, especially in that time period, being able to do all those things just sounds like such a fun, cool, just
Well,
great experience.
Yeah, it really was. The parties we would get to go to, the some of which I can't tell you about. But like there was,
I've heard the KLOL parties.
Oh yeah,
I heard
well,
the Christmas parties.
So you
goes
know,
down.
Oh, man.
you know a little bit about
there's
that.
there's
I remember,
footage online on that.
Yeah, and I remember things like having to go drag POD's drummer off the stripper bus,
man.
and there's
God.
all these like great
God.
great things that happen.
Wait, wasn't
that are,
POD supposed to be a Christian rock band?
Yes, they were, but that didn't mean that they weren't ready to have a good time.
Right.
So,
Wow.
That's hilarious.
So yeah.
So, I mean, like, after all of that, like David Bowie, Eminem, do you feel like did you ever get starstruck? Would you still get starstruck today? Is that just something that was never, is that just lost on you, the idea of being starstruck? Or?
For the most part, no, but there were a few like total favorites. Back in the day, I was a huge fan of Dennis Miller. I don't agree with all his politics, but this is back before he was as political as he is now.
Right.
I was just a huge fan of he had this show on HBO where he'd come out and do this opening monologue that I thought was the most brilliant thing ever. And I always thought, wow, I don't know what I'd ask him. Like I would feel like kind of an idiot because he just seemed so smart. And the other one, and laugh if you want to, but I did interview him, and I was so nervous, was William Shatner.
Really?
Yes.
Well, because, I mean,
Yeah.
as a Trekkie, how could you not?
Right. I grew up loving Star Trek my whole life. So when I got a chance to, interview Captain Kirk, it was like, I was like, I have no idea what I'm going to say.
What year was that?
This would have been about maybe 2002 or 3.
Okay.
Okay.
So yeah.
Wow.
So it was, he was already,
Was he promoting something? How did that happen?
Oh, William Shatner, let me tell you something, is always promoting something. Either he's been picked up to be a spokesman for something,
Yeah.
or he's written a book, or they hire him to host and narrate, true crime with William
Right.
Shatner,
Yeah.
all kinds of crazy stuff like
I mean,
that
I'm
that's
pretty
running
sure
on
he's
some
still
weird channel.
the
but-
Priceline negotiator, isn't
I
he
think-
still?
I think he
he's like
was.
90, and he's
He
still
was a-
chopping deals in half.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
I love him.
Yeah, I think he is the greatest bad actor of our generation.
Yeah.
We are
that's
going through the void. He's just like his line delivery is so insane.
And what I love about him is that, and he wasn't like this when he was younger, but as he got older, he became totally fine with just poking fun at himself
Yeah,
and being,
Yeah, I noticed that too.
making Captain Kirk jokes and
Right.
stuff. So now he just seems to love it all. So.
Yeah.
I dig him.
Wow.
So I got a little nervous interviewing him, but for the most part, I did have, the TV show The Bachelorette.
Yes.
So the other sort of like fun thing that I can tell you is there was this winner from The Bachelorette, and I can't think of her name now. It may come to me, but I'm getting old enough I don't remember all these names sometimes. But there was this winner of The Bachelorette who had no, I know what it was. She'd been on the show The Bachelor, so she was one of the girls that was trying to
it Tila
win over
Tequila or
the
one of those
guy.
girls?
No, it was before her.
Tequila.
but she'd gotten right up to the end, and then The Bachelor had chosen the other girl.
Okay.
But I think her name was Trista. They liked her on camera so much that they immediately signed her up to be the next Bachelorette.
Wow.
So she came around promoting The Bachelorette. And so I had my ex-wife actually used to watch those shows, so I would see some of them kind of by osmosis.
Right.
And so I said to her when I was doing the interview, I said, "So I saw you on The Bachelor." I said, "Tell me what it was like, because if he picks the other girl, they put you in the limo and drive you away, but they keep the camera on you the whole time as you're crying or whatever." So what was it like in that moment where he chose the other girl? And you're in the limo and the camera's on you, and you're realizing that not only are you going through that, but that your humiliation is happening in front of millions and millions of people watching on the. She goes, "Well, I wasn't humiliated." I said, "Really?" Because I saw the show, and I distinctly remember you saying, "I've never been so humiliated in my whole life." And then she jumped up and started yelling at me, and she was like, "I have a PhD, and you can't take that away from me." And like
shit.
it was all this. It got ugly.
So she really was hurt. Yeah.
So I referred to her from then on my show as Trista the Bachelorette.
That is crazy.
But those are some of the stories that I remember. I mean, there's been a lot of fun interviews and a lot of people that it's been just cool to be able to meet.
for sure.
I met Run DMC. How cool
madness.
is that?
Yeah.
Who gets to meet Run DMC?
Yeah.
So that's why I'm so like I just feel like I've been so lucky in my life
Right.
to be able to do some of these things and be a part of them. I met Pharrell Williams. Like
Nice.
he was the coolest,
crazy.
nicest guy. I had dinner with him.
Did he have the hat on?
Who gets to do?
No
This
hat.
This
Okay.
is all early. No hat.
Pre-hat.
He didn't have a hat on, but he was wearing. And this is back when he was still just kind of like part of the Neptunes.
The
and was
Neptunes,
Yeah.
yeah.
kind of putting his whole career together, but. he didn't have a hat on, but he had on a watch that cost more than my house.
Probably blinded you when you looked at it.
Oh my God! It was the blingiest thing I'd
Yeah.
ever seen.
Wow.
But somehow he pulled it off.
Nice.
So,
Yeah.
I bet he looks the same today
Yeah.
as he did that night.
He looks
'Cause he's like
18.
a vampire. or
Pretty
something.
much, because I just saw him on that Dave Grohl show where
Yeah.
they do the
Okay.
artists and their moms.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and he looked
Yeah,
exactly
he's like a
I remember.
vampire. It is nuts,
It's
man.
weird.
It's crazy. There's a few people like that, but Pharrell is like the one. He just doesn't age.
Right.
He doesn't age, and he just keeps getting cooler. Like he still makes good music. He still
Yeah.
produces a lot of people's music. I love him.
Kind of gets to do whatever he wants
Yeah,
now because
at that
he's
point,
such
yeah.
a big deal, you know.
Right.
And once you get away with wearing that hat, you can you can do whatever you want after that.
Yeah. See, like people like Cam Newton, I don't know if they can get away with the hat
Right.
anymore.
You know,
I mean, you got to be
or like-
you got to be on your
Sure.
game.
You
You
got to
know?
give Cam credit for trying.
He
you know,
does.
he doesn't. He doesn't slouch in that department. There's always something interesting.
Right.
I mean, how many out of all of the football players in the NFL, how many of them do they have a camera crew standing by to watch you enter the building
Yeah.
just to catch your outfit? You know,
Yeah.
so
It's weird how like the NBA's doing that too, where now it's all
Yeah.
about the outfits, and you're just
Yeah.
like, what is
Yeah.
going on?
It was like when Russell Westbrook started to dress like really crazy. You
Yeah.
know, like when he would just come to the game with like glasses with no lenses in them.
With like
And, yeah.
pants shorts, like it'll be like half pant, half short,
Yeah.
or like some just weird and ridiculous for
Yeah.
no reason. You're just like, why is
Harden
this
was the same way. He was always wearing
Right.
something
Yeah.
weird. So
I mean, and you know, dudes would get clowned for that if they dressed like that in the '90s or whatever. But now that's the hottest outfit you could wear. You know, if
Yeah,
you just come dressed as like.
But have you seen some of the shit we did wear in the 90s?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah,
you know,
true.
that was pretty embarrassing just in and of itself.
I like the early 2000s era of basketball when dudes would come to the game in like a Kengo with like a do-rag on underneath and like an oversized Adidas tracksuit. And that was just like, remember when like the oversized clothes were, if like your
Yeah.
clothes weren't a 3X, you were not looking right.
It was
you know?
ridiculous.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Crazy. Yeah, sports fashion is something I really enjoy. And you know, NFL players are interesting, you know. Guys like Cam. I'm trying to think who else has crazy style like that in the
NFL.
Yeah.
I don't know.
As much as I love him, Russell Wilson, I don't know if, you know, he just changes stylist every now and again, but he used to have this image where he was like the clean-cut
Oh, yeah.
Christian
Super
quarterback.
clean-cut guy.
Yeah.
But then he like got with Sierra, and now he like shows up to the Grammys with a Jerry curl and a purple suit, and I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
whoa,
and like
who is
chains.
this guy?
Isn't he wearing like chains now too?
Yeah, he wears chains and stuff.
Have you noticed though that he stopped talking about how he was going to save it for marriage?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I remember when he did an interview and he was talking about at the beginning of his relationship with Sierra, he said that the first thing he told her was that if they were going to do this, they were going to do it God's way. And he was like, God told me I need to lead this woman, and, you know, we're going to do it the biblical way. And now he's just like, you know, posting Instagram videos in bed with her and stuff like
took
that.
2 snaps
Right.
of Ciara's fingers
Yeah,
and that changed.
Right.
And I just love that, like, the guy she was with before him is Future, you know, like the
Right.
most prolific trap music artist in the world, and then from him to Russell Wilson. I love it.
She
That's
was
my
like,
quarterback,
I need to be saved.
I guess, if that's what you want to call it.
Yeah.
So, you know, you've been in radio for a long time. You've worked in a lot of different markets. What market, what part of the country would you say you enjoyed the most?
You know, it was one of the things. There's basically 2 ways to advance your career in radio, or there was back when I was in it, and one would be to kind of stay in the same place and try to grow as much as you can. But generally, you could advance your career faster if you were willing to work for a few years in one place and then maybe take a job in a little bigger place.
Right.
So I got a chance to live all over the country because that was the way that I did it. And every place was cool in its own sort of way. Even places that you don't think of as being that cool, like St. Louis, Missouri, or Mobile, Alabama, had their own things about them that were really cool. And I would say I probably enjoyed Houston and Boston the most out of the places that I was on the air and in radio. In Houston, I was part of the team that put the Buzz together when that alternative station first launched, and that was a blast up until a big corporation bought us and wouldn't let us do the fun stuff anymore. And then in Boston, I worked for 7 years at WFNX, which does not exist anymore, but it was owned at the time by the Boston Phoenix, which was the sort of cool college-oriented weekly newspaper that came out. And so between the newspaper and the station, we got to do some fun stuff. And we were also kind of the little guy. Our signal wasn't as good as our competitor.
Right.
So we just had to always try to be outrageous and different just to get attention. And that was fun to do.
Yeah.
You know, it really was. So
Boston has like this aura about it. Every time I hear it or see it or, you know, people talk about it, like, and there's obviously many movies made, you know, based in Boston.
Sure, yeah. I just watched The Departed.
What a classic.
Recently. My wife hadn't seen it, so we sat and watched it, and I was like, man, that movie makes me want to go back and visit Boston again.
Yeah,
it's
like
so fun.
this rough and tough kind of town that kind of seems like it was built on, like, you know, people's, like, you know, like blue collar type of thing. And then, but then there's also this other side of it where there's, like, you know, they also have, like, great food and, like, this is interesting, unique culture that's like kind of its own little niche thing, you know. And then everyone has their own accent. Yeah.
I loved it when I was there. The accent is a little hard to get used to, but I will say in The Departed, every single actor nailed it.
Yeah.
They all had it
and
right.
what a cast, right?
Oh, yeah.
Damon, DiCaprio, Nicholson. I mean, it was amazing. And that, you know, spoiler alert, if anyone hasn't seen it, towards the end when they all just, like, one by one, they just all die, you know, like that is one of the craziest movies.
It really is, yeah. You know, you saying spoiler reminded me of this fun thing that we used to do on my show back when I was in Boston. I did the morning show for a number of the years that I was there, and so we used to do this thing where we would announce that we had gotten a hold of the storyline for like some big thing. Like I remember one in particular was the series finale of The Sopranos. Right?
Wow.
So we was like, we know what happens in the series finale of The Sopranos. So what we're going to do is we're going to share that with you, but only for those of you who want to listen. So we would play a little music and we would we would tell people, and this is back when most people had like a left-right knob on their stereo or their headphones or whatever. We would tell, if you listen in the left ear, we'll tell you what's going to happen tonight on the season finale of the series finale of The Sopranos. If you don't want to hear that, adjust your stereo to the right, and in the right ear, our newsman will read the poem "The Frost" by I can't think of the poet's name now. The Jack Frost walks on cat feet. That poem. So anyway, and then we would just play some tinkly music under both of them. But the joke sort of was, everybody told me that they always tried to listen to both. So they would leave it up and they would try to make their brain focus on both. But of course the spoilers we had were all completely bogus. And we tried to make them as funny as possible. But you know, it's just something to make people talk, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
That's cool.
But yeah, that's what popped into my mind when we were talking about Boston and you said spoiler alert.
And you couldn't do stuff like that now, right? Could you? I mean,
you know, there are a few. So the people who are still doing creative stuff on the radio, and there are some of them, have a tendency to be people who have had enough of a track record of success, generally with like a morning show. Like I think, what's the guy's name here at the Buzz? I always forget his name that does the morning show.
I don't know.
Rod Ryan.
Oh, Rod Ryan.
Right.
Yeah.
So Rod Ryan has been successful enough at that station for long enough that he's probably got pretty good job security and probably has a pretty good ability to still do some of the sort of creative things that he wants. But trust me, those ratings tick down.
That's it. No more fun for you. Yeah.
Then people start coming in, analyzing what it is he's doing. So it's kind of like having leverage. It's kind of like if you're a movie producer and you've produced a successful movie or series of movies, the studio's probably going to hire you and let you do what you do.
Right.
If you don't have that kind of track record, you have much less leverage, and there's going to be much more storyline consultants and other things like that involved in your project. So it's kind of the same way. So there's a few things, mostly morning show guys, but outside of that, you can't do fun stuff like that on the radio anymore.
But it just seems like in a world where everyone can just plug their phone into their car and click whatever song they want, you would think there would be, you know, a market for just programming that you can't get, like, fun stuff. You would think they would want to go towards, like, okay, what can we do that's more unique that Spotify can't, or whatever.
I apologize for just continuing to talk about radio, but that's what I will tell you from my perspective, and doesn't mean that I'm right. From my perspective, radio has responded to the competition of Spotify and Apple Music and all of that exactly 100% wrong. What they should have done is what you were talking about.
Yeah.
They should have looked for more, they used to call it, back in the 90s, must-see TV on NBC on Thursday nights, because that was their lineup that you just couldn't miss if you were a fan of Friends or whatever it was. And the way to combat, what did Netflix do? When all these other services started popping up and streaming, and they're going, well, we're Paramount, so we own those movies, so we'll keep those. You won't be able to stream those. And we're Disney, we'll keep those movies. Netflix said,
we're going to make our own movies.
We're going to make our own. And they went out, and the first thing that they made was House of Cards.
Yeah.
And it was so good that everybody started talking about it, and that kind of ushered in the era. And now all of their competitors are all trying to do the same thing. They're trying to put out with their own series or movies.
Everyone
that
has
people,
originals. Even Roku, Roku has. It's like I thought it was just a type of TV, but now they have their own stuff. YouTube,
Apple TV,
Facebook, social media services are now all trying to have a watch platform with their own original content.
At this point, the average person's only going to be able to feel like they can afford to subscribe to one or two
I already
of those
feel like
things,
I have
right?
so many. Sometimes I'm looking at my credit card statement, I'm like, God damn, do I need all this? It's so much.
So if a new one comes along and all they're showing is just whatever movies they've got licensed at the moment, it's not a real grabber. Disney Plus, initially took off because of all the Disney movies that you could let your kids watch.
Right.
But the real icing on the cake for them was when The Mandalorian took off.
So good.
That's when everybody said, oh, I've heard so much about this. I got to add Disney Plus so I can see it. And by the way, it's worth it.
It's amazing.
It's really good. And it's the same thing for, other services. So if radio had done that, if radio had personalities on or music curation experts on who were so good that you were like, I got to hear that. I got to hear what they're talking about. I got to hear what kind of music they're playing. And if you think about it, Apple's done some of that kind of stuff with it was originally called Beats One. I think it's now just
they had
called
their own radio.
Yeah, but what they try to do is they try to bring on different celebrities or different music notable people to kind of curate an hour's worth of music, and then we do some of that same kind of stuff here at our company. But that to me is sort of appointment listening, and that's what radio should have done more of. And instead, they went the other way and just went cost cutting.
Right.
And when they went cost cutting, the product got more and more generic and less. Why would you sit through that many commercials to hear the same music you can hear on Spotify?
Yep.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, for sure.
No ads. You can literally listen to whatever song you want as many times as you want.
Right.
So
or you can put on one of their curated stations or lists, or you can listen to Third Rock Radio, or there's so many different things where you can find and sample and enjoy music without that do have something unique and interesting to offer. So.
Yeah, and then that's also the way of also pop music and other. I mean, throughout all of society, there's at least something in every aspect of it where there's the corporate side of it, and then there's the indie side of it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Craft beer, for example, right? Or beer
Perfect
in general.
Example, yeah.
And then, so it's it sucks because you would think most people would choose, I want the independent, or I want the creative, or I want the new and interesting, versus the generic, or it's always gonna be the same, the McDonald's or whatever it is, right? But it doesn't seem to happen. I don't know why. It's such an interesting concept, right? Why do people choose that other than, is that what they really like, or is it what they're being advertised, or is it what I've always wondered why
it's a combination of all those things. But what happens, craft beer is a perfect example of this, and we talk about this on the Smoking and Toasting show that I am lucky enough to be a part of. When craft beer started to become a thing, after years of beer in general kind of beginning to trend downward in terms
Right.
of the percentage of alcohol sales,
Yeah.
and wines and spirits were trending up. Beer as a whole was trending downward, but what wasn't trending downward was craft beer, and it was still a very small part of
Right.
the overall beer sales, but it was moving up and moving up rapidly. So,
what year would you say this is? Because I can't even remember a world without craft beer now.
well, it's
Like
been
90s?
It's been I can remember drinking Shiner Bock and Shellis White and a couple of things like that back in the 90s. I remember when I moved to Boston, which was late 90s, and I discovered the Harpoon Brewery there, and they're amazing. It was the first IPA I ever had was Harpoon IPA, and to this day I owe them a debt of gratitude for changing my life.
Yeah.
But so I remember it from back around that time, but it's really been in about the past 15 years that it's become a force in the market.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And so what happened? The same exact thing that happened in radio. The big beers, who are the ones with the deep pockets,
Right.
started buying up the little guys. Now, fortunately, brewers can do a much better job of launching their own brewery than the average radio
Right.
fan can do of launching their own radio station. Although now the internet makes it a little bit easier, but there's still a lot of cost
Sure.
factors that
Yeah,
are
for
involved.
sure.
But the point is, if you can make your own beer out of your garage and get somebody to buy it, you can be the next small brewery.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of these guys have done. So the independent thing has stayed alive and has now become almost like a badge of honor for the guys who didn't get bought out by Anheuser-Busch or the big companies. And they put the little symbol on the side of their cans and bottles of the Independent Brewers Association, and
Right.
and it's a big deal. So part of it, though, is just access. Access and familiarity. People have a tendency to stay with what they're familiar with, and they have a tendency to go with what's easy to get.
Yeah, I guess whenever you have that type of money and that type of influence, you're able to buy up all the shelf space. You're able to buy up the slots, the
Sure.
big time slots.
Yeah.
So obviously in TV, radio, wherever that is, if you have that access, right, you're kind of like forcing people to like, this is what you're going to listen to, or this is what you're going to have to eat, or whatever it is. Like,
When you go to the grocery store, know that the things that are at eye level on the shelf,
Yeah.
they have paid a slotting fee to be there.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was unaware.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's par for the course, and you can't really fault the grocery store companies because their profit margins are so low because they're all trying to out discount each other. The profit margins are so low they've got to look for other ways to make money. But slotting fees and displays and stuff, you walk past an end cap for Hawaiian Tropic sunscreen at Walmart. Guess what?
right.
That cost Hawaiian Tropic some cash.
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess the solution, I guess just thinking out loud, would be maybe just being a little more informed, a little more mindful about what you buy, what you consume.
Mm-hmm.
That way, you don't have to, like, I guess you feel like more of like a cog in the machine whenever you're just like buying all of the
Right.
generic stuff or all of the, big name stuff, because it's like that's going to be there no matter what, right?
Right.
Right. Well,
so
another thing that happens, though, is selection paralysis. People
Yeah.
walk into, like, the Specs where I like to shop down in Midtown on Smith Street. They walk in, you walk into the craft beer area, and all of a sudden your brain just
Yeah.
starts to rotate in your head
Craziness.
because there's so much to choose from. So sometimes people just go, I'll just get a Bud Light because
Right.
at least I know what that is and I know what I'm getting. That was one of the reasons that we started the Smoking and Toasting show, was to help people go, let us at least tell you what we're getting out of this,
Yeah.
and maybe it'll help for you. And
yeah.
that's,
By the way, shout out to Smoking and Toasting, which I have awesome ton of fun getting to do that show and be behind the scenes and
Yeah.
have a lot of fun doing that show. If anyone hasn't listened to it, it's called Smoking and Toasting. You can find them on all the podcast platforms. It's a really, really cool show. And
it's
Cruze
a-
is one of the hosts on
Yeah.
that
it's
show.
a fun show, along with my partner Ian Barry,
Yeah.
who is far funnier than I am and far more interesting. But one of these days, I'm going to teach him to love
Yeah.
IPAs the way
And
they should.
that's one of the reasons why I got into podcasting. Really, was my first opportunity to be able to, sit behind a board and see how it all works and
Right.
see how Cruze set up the show. And then, it was a huge inspiration for me. Along with the Joe Rogan podcast, which I love.
Yeah.
That's why that's a similar format to how we do this. It's just
Kinda.
It's just kinda-
conversational.
yeah,
Yeah.
whatever.
Bring in people
whatever
and-
comes up, right?
And
Yeah,
that's what's
so-
amazing about the podcasting platform is you can literally have a show about pretty much anything that interests you, and everyone has a platform to kind of, explore their hobby more. And so it sounds like you've been into spirits and stuff like that for a while. So I mean, what was like the spark that made you want to start Smoking and Toasting? Because it's a great show. You've got almost 250 episodes now. You've been doing it for
yes, 250 episodes. The answer to your question, and I tell this to people all the time when people say, what made you start this show about spirits and craft beer and cigars, and my one-word answer is samples.
Yeah.
And it's not like we get that many samples, really.
Right.
But, yeah, every now and then somebody leaves behind a bottle of something, and we get to take it home or brings in a few cigars.
We've had some pretty good samples.
I can't complain.
But I mean, you've gone down to Honduras, and you've smoked cigars out there.
That was a lot of fun. Got to hang out with some of the the notable people in the cigar industry, which wouldn't mean anything to people who aren't interested in that.
Right.
But if you're somebody who enjoys that, it's kind of cool to sit down with Rocky Patel.
They're like the superstars of that whole
Absolutely,
field,
yeah. It's like any genre of anything. It's going to have its own personalities and superstars, and certainly craft beer is the same way. And spirits, man, some of the master distillers from Scotland that do single malt scotch that we've gotten a chance to hang in. You can just listen to them talk for hours, which reminds me, by the way, of another great story. But when the band Garbage from back in the 90s was out doing a lot of stuff, and they were being I was super excited about it because their drummer Butch Vig produced some of the biggest alternative rock albums of all time. He produced Nevermind from Nirvana.
Wow.
He produced Smashing Pumpkins and several other things back in the early days of alternative rock that were just really awesome. So he came in, but I soon forgot all about him when Shirley Manson, the singer, came in, because not only was she really great looking, but she has this thick Scottish brogue, and she could read the phone book for all I care. I mean, I just loved being able to hear
There's
her
something
speak.
about a woman with an accent. It's just something about
women
it.
say it's the same way with guys, by the way. A guy with an English accent or something.
David Bowie, probably.
Yeah, David Bowie.
Probably got a lot of women just for that accent.
Sure. Yeah.
And a few men, too, I understand.
Yeah.
But
Probably.
Hey, I mean, Smoking and Toasting is such a great show, and I enjoy drinking. There's not much that I won't drink, but I've had stuff that you've let me try after the show, and I'm like, God damn, I would have never found this. Like I've had spirits that have just blown my mind. Like you have had some amazing stuff on the show.
And that's why it's seriously fun to do the show. I mean, the samples thing is a easy joke, but it's fun to do the show because it's fun to be able to tell people, hey, if you haven't tried this, we tried Satol this last week on the show, which is a spirit that's kind of akin to tequila and mezcal, but it's also a little bit like a gin in that it's more floral. And it's amazing. I never would have discovered that unless I'd been doing the show, or unless I'd been listening to a show or watching a show where somebody was talking about it. Right. And so that's what we
I didn't even know that existed. I had no idea this existed. It's a whole category of its own spirit.
And now I have to go buy some. Damn it. But no, it's really good. So so that is what makes that show a lot of fun to do, and so it's not like we're making a whole bunch of money doing it. So it's nice to at least be able to enjoy it, and with anything, and you guys know this from doing your show, sometimes you just have to do it, and keep at it, and eventually it will find its.
That's literally
path.
what we did. Just one day, we're like, look. We talked about doing this for a little while. Why don't we just do it? Let's just go in the studio.
I was like,
Are you busy? Go talk about something.
Adam was like, no. And he's like, are you busy? I'm like, no. And I was like, all right, let's go in there and just start. Like, let's just do it.
That's
turn on the mics.
That's the hardest part. Starting and then not pod fading after about 10 to 12 episodes is the hardest part. If you get into the 20s and 30s in numbers of episodes and you're still having fun doing it, then you got a good chance at keeping it alive.
And that's the other thing about it was regardless of what happens in the future with this show, it's really just fun. Like I told a lot of people, honestly, it's almost like therapy for me to come in here and just talk and just be able to talk about whatever and just have a good time and just be able, I love the idea of intentionally sitting down for a conversation. I feel like it's so rare that we do that in our lives, that we intentionally, whether maybe you're going out to dinner with some friends or a family or something like that, well, that's kind of like what you're doing. But other than that, it's rare that, unless you call a friend or, there's some things that you can do that, but we're like really just intentionally, hey, we're gonna sit down for an hour and just talk and just have a good conversation.
And if you think about
And
that, there's less of that going on these days. People
there
have a
really
tendency
is.
to text each other, and the interchanges are short, and so to be able to really sit down and kind of go over something and kind of delve and dig deep into it is good. I mean, the only times I can think of that you really do that are A, when you're drinking with friends, and B, when you're doing something like this. And it's interesting.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, sometimes my phone will ring. I'll get a phone call, and I'm like, a phone call? You know, people still do this.
What is this strange person?
So it's
ringing
nice.
my
It just
device?
feels like human, to sit down and just have human interaction and discuss. I mean, we've talked about crazy, complex topics in here. Like we've talked about.
You've lost me several times on shows. I've been like, okay,
the shows
I
with
don't know what they're
where we're
now.
talking about like fucking quantum
Right.
physics.
That was one of them. Yeah.
And then sometimes we're like, what would it look like if a dolphin man hybrid, washed up on the beach? So it's fun to be able to have just that space to just literally just sit around with your friends and do whatever you want.
Well, and I think one of the things that the big corporations, whether it's radio or television or whatever, really miss is the sense of how much people actually enjoy that. Mm-hmm. People enjoy hearing people being real.
Yeah.
I always used to say, back when I was on the air on broadcast radio, I used to say it's more important for people to perceive me as real than to perceive me as right. In fact, I learned a trick when I was about halfway through my career that I've shared with a lot of other, up-and-coming personalities, and it was when you feel like you're not getting like any response from your audience, because we used to love it when the phones would ring because we could take a call and talk to somebody, and you felt like the audience was interacting with you. So I thought I came up with this idea. It's like, if you ever want to make the phones ring and they're not ringing, just say something wrong.
Right.
Say something incorrect. Not something controversial necessarily. Just something incorrect. Like announce, say, oh, you loved watching The Departed, and you loved that Ben Affleck was so good in it, and watch the phone ring with people who want to tell you, hey, Ben Affleck wasn't in The Departed. Matt Damon was in that. You're getting confused. People. All of a sudden, people would interact with you like that. So being real is what I was really trying to say. Is I think so much more important than a lot of the other things that go into a lot of the entertainment that we have today, and it's why it's something I think the big companies really miss. I think they miss that mark.
Yeah, definitely.
Agreed on that, man, for sure.
I'm trying to think I think it was Conan O'Brien who had a thing where he was like, if you spot a mistake or, a correction in the show, write it in and we'll investigate it. And there was some prize if you could correctly point out a mistake in the show. And he would get like thousands of letters every week.
People love to do that. I don't know why, but they do.
It's just some inner human satisfaction of proving somebody wrong. I don't know what it is. I mean, look at the comment section on literally every YouTube video that's ever existed. The internet is a terrifying place, especially if you're ever wrong for a second.
Yeah.
But you have to be able to be a little bit thick-skinned, because if what you're doing doesn't generate any criticism, then what you're doing is not interesting at all. Yeah. I mean, it's just the way it is. I mean, some people are going to love you and some people are going to hate you, and you got to actually be okay with that.
It's a great point.
Because there are some people who their personality type, I'm not being critical, some people's personality type, it just crushes them if they think people don't like them. And I get that. Like, I've got a little bit of that in me. I want to be liked,
Yeah, I think everyone does.
But if you can't handle the fact that some people are not going to like you, they're not going to agree with you, and they're going to be pretty mean about it, then you can't even do a YouTube channel or post on TikTok.
Just
or
walk into any second grade classroom.
Oh yeah,
and we can find out how humans, see, how we act to each other.
It's a good microcosm, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, what's crazy though, with the way political correctness is now, people are almost terrified to have opinions on a lot of stuff, because I mean, it's like. Now, it used to be to where, your career would only be ended by someone with power who maybe didn't like. But now, just a nobody, or a group of just people who are just in a comment section somewhere, just on social media, your whole world could just come crashing down.
That's the cancel culture is what it's called.
Yeah, cancel culture is now so prevalent that I feel like it has scared a lot of people out of really expressing their opinions.
We just saw who DaBaby, whatever, canceled from
everything.
show
At least 8 music festivals have all dropped.
Just for one. I don't know. I honestly didn't see the whole thing, what he said, but I don't know how bad it was. But just the simple fact that you can just say a sentence and then you're just done. You're gone.
When people are surprised that a gangster rapper has a controversial take, they probably wouldn't like what the other gangster rappers have to say about that. You know,
So I'll just say that I really struggle with both sides of this thing because the fact that we live in a society that is actively trying to be less degrading to ethnic groups, people of different sexual persuasions, and this is a good thing. This is how we're supposed to evolve as a people. So that part of it is really good.
Of course.
But the flip side of the coin, though, is that now somebody who said, "Look, I said stuff when I was a kid and when I was in high school." That I'd be horrified if anybody knew I said. Now, I just was young and stupid and I didn't know any better. You know what I mean? And last year I was probably young and stupid and didn't know any better.
That should be okay. That should be accepted. That should be something that you honor. Like, yeah, look, I was, not as smart as I am today, but that's who I was. I'm growing and learning as I go, right?
Right.
I think
that, the undue weight of the public trying to call out every little mistake anybody has ever made I think that's wrong. But yet, I don't want to see us not keep moving forward as a society, as people, in terms of learning how to address people more, more fairly and more inclusively. The idea behind all this is good. It's just that the execution of some of it is really bad.
Yeah. I mean, at the pinnacle of human society, you would have a world with zero racism, zero sexism, zero prejudice. And we're trending closer to that every day, but it's like the way we're getting there, are we getting there the way we should?
What's unfortunate, though, is that as that has a tendency to happen in certain parts of society, what you get is the people who then feel marginalized by it in some way become more radical in their viewpoints. If you are a white male in your 20s or 30s, it is easy for you to feel, as you see things like Black Lives Matter gain traction, and as you see other movements that maybe don't pertain to you in your ethnicity or your sexual orientation, as you see those things gain, not everybody, but some will respond to it, to use that group as an example, by becoming more radicalized because they feel like their world is being taken away from them. Never mind that maybe the world wasn't structured fairly to begin with. It's what they know. It's what they've been a part of. So as those groups become more radical, you see things happen like, January 6th at the Capitol and things like where you got a group of people that, and I'm not excusing them in any way, but you got a people that were there. They weren't there just because they belonged to this political ideology or that political ideology. They were there because they were pissed.
Yeah.
They were mad because they felt like something was being taken away from them, or they were being yanked against their will into a more, progressive part of society. And, I in my mind, I don't think that justifies any of the things that they did.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
But it's important to understand where does that rage, that emotion come from? I'm not saying it's justified. I'm only saying that if we understand that is bubbling under, then we can understand why, unfortunately, we haven't made the strides that we would like to as a society in being more fair and more open. And when they can take a phrase like woke, which should be a very positive thing, and turn it into something that's negative, because they think it represents something that they are against, then that tells you something right there. So it shouldn't be a bad thing to be politically correct, but it is because of the way that it's portrayed. We should be sensitive. We should be,
of course,
fair to our fellow man.
You should try and be as understanding as humanly possible. Yeah, of course.
I think maybe Stevie Wonder and Paul McCartney said it best.
Yeah.
Ebony and Ivory.
Oh, yeah. Oh, there you go. Yeah.
I was
that
wondering
should
where
be
I
our
was going. I was
yeah.
like, where is this going?
Remember, I'm old. My musical references are.
That should be our
are
outro
ancient.
song for the
Yeah,
week.
Right. That'd be pretty cool.
Oh man, what a great note to end on. That was a great show, Cruze. Thank you for your
gosh, this was
time
fun.
and coming by.
I really enjoy getting to, like not having to do any prep. I can just walk in.
yeah,
and
you
ask
can.
questions.
That's why we do it. We literally, is the guest here? Let's walk in there and just
Yeah.
start. You know.
Yeah.
But you're welcome back anytime. So thank you
Oh, well,
for
thanks.
your time.
It'd be fun. I'm sure I have a few stories I could dig up that I haven't
Yeah,
told you yet.
definitely.
Yeah, man. Or if you want to come in, just talk about whatever, man. Anything, any new music, beer, politics,
Well,
whatever, man.
I always
we
love
it
talking
all.
about
Sports.
music and beer. Sports,
Yeah.
sports. You know?
Oh yeah, we got to do a sports podcast
Yeah.
probably with you.
We
Football
to-
would be fun.
We
need
totally
a-
should do one on the football season
Yeah.
because just to sit here and argue about our
Oh,
favorite
definitely.
football stuff
That'd be
would
fun.
I'd be a blast for me.
Yeah,
For sure.
that'd be really
Yeah.
fun. Yeah, and I think the next episode we're gonna do is gonna be a sports edition.
Hopefully,
Because
yeah.
we have like our basic episodes, and then we have like our kind of sports edition aside
Yeah.
because we love sports, and it doesn't fit kind of with everything else. So it's like
We like
and
to
a lot,
just-
not everyone likes sports.
Not everyone
so-
wants to listen to 2 hours of us talking
Right.
about draft picks and stuff like that. So we kind of put that in its
Yeah,
own
yeah.
little category. Yeah.
So, favorite sport for you?
Favorite sport?
Yeah, favorite sport.
I
You're
mean,
talking about like professional sport to watch and follow.
basketball and football is like kind of in the same.
Kind
I
of
can't
the
kind of
same.
pick one. They're both I love.
Yeah,
How
football.
about you?
Yeah, football.
Yeah,
Definitely.
See, notice how for very few people it's baseball anymore.
Yeah.
No, that
Well,
we
it
had a
used to
whole
be-
show about that talking
Yeah.
about baseball.
Used to be, but
yeah.
that was America's pastime,
I used
and
to
now
love, I mean, I still love it. I still love it.
now it's
Yeah.
a distant third. You know.
Yeah.
Well, and here in Houston, that's the only pro team we've got that's any good. Is our baseball team.
Seriously, man.
So
The Rockets might be good though. They might trend upwards this
I
year.
could-
They had a
I
really
could
good
see them-
draft.
I could see them doing better in the years to come.
Yeah, I'm excited for the new era of the Rockets.
And
I
it's
think
not
that's
hard to be better than last year.
Sure.
Yeah,
I would think they were
Legitimately
true.
like the worst team in the NBA.
This is true. I'm just happy that Brooklyn didn't win
Yeah.
everything.
I know.
Same.
You know?
Yeah, I'm against the super team thing.
Yeah, me too.
Lakers,
Yeah.
they can be gone
The Bucks did it the hard way, you know?
the right way.
Yeah, you love to see it. Well, all right, guys, that's our show for this week. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. Until next week, listen to the radio, go out and have fun, and just try and be a good person. Stay safe out there in the cosmos, ladies and
Peace.
gentlemen.
Cheers, y'all.